If you think we sound awesome on your computer, get our free app and listen to us in your car or wherever. Now, back to the music on the Pulsar Radio Show on RadioVegas.rocks.
We have lost the will. Greed has poisoned men's souls. We think too much and we feel too little. We need humanity.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Pulsar Radio, and that was the Order of Annihilation from Tyrants by Night. And right now, I am joined by the guys in Tyrants by Night. How's it going, guys?
Good. How you doing?
Let me introduce you guys to the listening audience, and if you don't mind saying who you are and what you do in the band real quick for me.
Cool. My name is Matt O'Rourke, and I'm the lead singer and guitar player.
Mike Lanto, I play bass and backing vocals.
Jay Dumas, play rhythm guitar.
Thanks for joining me, guys. And that song is Badass. Can you guys tell me a little bit about that track?
Yeah, I wrote that song a year or so ago. We put it out, and it was just a bunch of riffs that I had laying around, and then me and Jay kind of morphed it together into what it is, and we came up with the lyrics and
the idea of wiping out the human existence, a la, God with the big flood, but this time it's done by humans and nukes, and starting over again, hitting the reset button because we're all a bunch of fucking idiots.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like someone tell the fat lady she's on in 5. The way things have been going lately.
That's exactly what it is.
So, it's really cool hearing this kind of metal, especially come out of Vegas, because Vegas has a really, really strong metal scene. I would argue it's one of the most consistent scenes in subgenre scenes in Vegas, besides the punk scene. But a lot of it in the last few years has really been like death metal or metalcore. So it's really cool to hear, kind of a throwback's the wrong term, but I guess like an updated version. I guess I would say maybe like an updated take on a lot of like, the kind of metal that got me into metal as a kid, because like for me, it's like, my first metal bands weren't necessarily death metal bands. A lot of my first metal bands growing up were bands like Megadeth and Metallica and, and Anthrax and bands like that where, even though it was heavy, there was still a lot of melody, especially in the vocals. And also, quite frankly, a lot of metal bands in that era, in my opinion, had something to say.
Right.
Which, I think maybe, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that metal bands now don't, but I think maybe they were coming from a different headspace than other bands at the time.
Right.
So I think it's really cool, I think, to hear this sort of style of metal coming out of Vegas. Do you find that when you guys are playing shows locally, do you kind of find that you guys tend to stand out a little bit because of that, or do you find that it's kind of easy to kind of just run with it?
Yeah, we'll play with anybody. We run with whatever we do, but yeah, it is kind of, you don't really fit with the hardcore death metal bands, and it's hard, but that comes from we just write music that we grew up listening to that nobody plays anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think the clean vocals and melodies and harmonies and all stuff like that comes from my upbringing on the Beach Boys and the Beatles. That's still a huge influence in me. But my love is for heavy metal, so I try to combine the two of them, That's
awesome, man, and it's really cool to, that's really cool to hear. I think there's kind of I remember back in the 2000s, like, going to hardcore shows, it's like, the minute a band worked clean vocals, it's like clean vocals was like a dirty term almost.
Right. Yeah. I never fell into that. I like to be able to understand what I'm being sung. You know what I mean? I like to be able to understand it. So.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. Like one of the things I love about Hatebreed as a band is even though the lyrics are screamed, you can understand every single thing that Jamie Jost is saying.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the aggression and power is still there, and you can understand what they're saying.
Right.
Jost is a big influence for like my dirty like screaming vocals, because he does use that projection and like clear enunciation to where everybody can hear that, but it's still really guttural and powerful.
Very true. So Matt, I know that now you and I go back a ways. You've been doing your thing out here for a while, and you've been in a lot of really prominent Vegas metal bands over the years. You've also spent a lot of time on the road with some larger acts like Iced Earth. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I got into me and you go back. I remember going to the Castle and seeing you there, and we've known each other forever. But yeah, I got into the first band I had in town was called Avalon Dies, and that was with everybody, and that kind of broke up around 2007, and that's when I got into the cover band scene out here. During that time, John Schaefer from Iced Earth hit me up and asked me if I wanted to do his side project, Sons of Liberty. So I went off and did that, and when that ended, I came back and got back into the cover stuff, and then he asked me if I wanted to come out and tech with them. So I'd spent probably all of 2011, 12 on the road with Iced Earth. Worked for went back out with a couple other bands, but I've been back in town for a while doing the cover band stuff, and then now doing Tyrants full time. So
that's awesome. And that's another thing I also think is really cool is the fact that, a lot of bands who play original music out here really have this sort of weird sort of like attitude towards cover bands and tribute bands and playing in them. And my attitude's always been, if you enjoy playing music and someone's willing to pay you to play music, wouldn't you rather do that than work in a warehouse or flip burgers or something, or any of the other myriad of unpleasant things you could be doing to earn a living?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I've been really lucky to be able to do that for for as long as I have. And I'm like you said, it's a lot better than waking up to an alarm clock every day.
Yeah.
So,
So how did this project come together?
this started out me and my brother Mike. He was the original drummer, and it was actually funny because when I got back off a tour, I had watched every local opening act in this town. You know, because you go out and they have the local openers, and every band sounded the exact same. It was down-tuned, screaming vocals. And I came back and I was just so over it because every night it was like cookie cutter of the exact same band every night in a different sound. So that's when I got together with my brother. It's like, we should write some songs I was like, I'm going to tune to E and I'm going to sing, and it's going to be, you know, what we like. Mm-hmm. So that was about 2014 was the first incarnation of it. And then we had another singer and another bass player at that point, and that kind of fell apart. Took about a year off of it, formed this incarnation of the band, where I took over the lead vocals and brought Jay in. This is where we are now. We've been through a couple of lineup changes since then, but this is the strongest lineup we've ever had.
That's awesome.
Definitely.
That's very cool. And it's interesting what you said about, the whole issue of, especially on the road, sometimes, the openers can become very, very monotonous.
Absolutely.
Because, I think part of that, maybe the consequence part of that might be kind of a consequence of just the internet in general. Because, if you think about it, like 20, 30 years ago, pre everybody on the planet having the internet in their pocket with a smartphone, you were in a situation where basically if you were influenced by something, it was a little bit more organic. You were picking up a record or you were seeing a band live, as opposed to now. I think you don't necessarily have as many distinctive regional variations of styles of music. Like, back in the 80s or 90s, there was a very distinct style of, West Coast punk, West Coast thrash, East Coast metal, East Coast hardcore. Now I feel like it's a little bit more, not necessarily uniform, but I think it's just, everyone's picking up influences from everywhere.
Right.
But sometimes that can almost turn into a little bit of like a musical primordial soup, so to speak.
Yeah.
So this next track that I'm going to play from you guys, Under Wicked Skies, tell me a little bit about this one.
Well, I'm going to pass that to Jay because that was one of his baby.
The Under Wicked Skies came about. I started playing the main melody one day, sitting on my couch in my underwear, and felt like I had something special here. Recorded it, put some programmed drums behind it, and sent out to the guys, and we kind of whittled it down into shape. And I always had this idea of, I came into the band after the first record, and the first record was definitely a bit more politically driven, definitely with a lot of frustration, but I felt like politics and music kind of puts you in a little bit of a box. And I had proposed the idea of opening things up, of subject matter and song concepts, and I wanted to write songs about anything that more people can relate to. And had an idea, my very best friend suffers from addiction and battled it, and is about 5 years clean and sober, and Matt's had his demons, everyone's had their shit, and I just had this idea of, let's write a song along those lines that people who are struggling or have struggled can relate to and understand what it is to go through depression and addiction and thoughts of suicide and overcoming them, and just getting into the deep, dark, gritty stuff. So that was where that song came from.
Right on.
I wanted something real from the heart, from real life experience that people could relate to.
Right on. First and foremost, congrats to your friend on his sobriety. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
I really like what you said there about how, making music that people can relate to. Because again, that's another weird sort of, I think, fear sometimes that I think a lot of metal bands have is, it's like they want to be liked, but they don't necessarily want to be like so liked or so relatable that, people who don't look like them are listening to them.
Yeah.
I've run into that. And ironically, it's weird. Like, you run into that in the metal scene. You even run into that even more in the indie rock scene sometimes. Mm-hmm. There's kind of that stigma of like, well, I don't want certain people liking my style. What you said as well, too, about how when it comes to being, relatable to an audience, I mean, regardless of where someone stands on the political spectrum, everybody knows someone, or if they haven't, they know someone who has struggled with these sort of things, whether it's addiction or depression or things like that. Being able to come to people from that perspective, I think, is really awesome, and it means a lot to people. I mean, that's those are the songs and those are the lyrics that stick with people over time, man.
Yeah, because it's real. It's from experience. It's from real life, and you can't manufacture that. So it's just finding the combination of putting them together in a vocal melody and a delivery that fits perfectly with the song. You know, it's that combination of everything coming together, and I'm very proud of that song. And we all are. Every time we play, we love playing it because it's got this great energy to it, and it's, you know, people seem to really like it.
That's awesome. Here is Tyrants by Night with Under Wicked Skies. All right, that was Under Wicked Skies from Tyrants by Night, my studio guest today. We are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I'm going to have more new music from them, and I'm going to be talking to them about their awesome free show that you can catch tonight at 172 at the Rio, and that's coming up right after this.
Now, more music with Pulsar on the Pulsar Radio Show, right here on RadioVegas.rocks.
Give the cartel the power of government. We'll take our cartel agreement so that we can self-regulate to our advantage, and we'll call it the Federal Reserve Act. And then we'll take this cartel agreement to Washington and convince those idiots there to pass it into law.
Get the rope through in their lives.
That was Hang 'Em High from Vegas' own Tyrants by Night, and you can catch these guys for free tonight at 172 inside the Rio. And I am joined in studio by Tyrants by Night. Thanks a lot for joining me, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us on, bud.
And that song kicks ass. If you don't mind, tell me a little bit about tell me the story behind Hang 'Em High.
Oh, that was a song that was written a long time ago. It's a very, very good political song. It's written. The lyrics are written by my brother, and it's about the Federal Reserve System. I don't know if we have enough time to go into that subject. But
we have all sorts of time, man.
Yeah, right. But no, that was a good ass-kicking song. I think that was one of the first songs that me and my brother had completely finished. It was one of the first ones we had done. It's a good ass kicker. It's got some really cool tight rhythm guitar playing, which I'm a big fan of. Yeah, as you can tell.
Definitely.
It's also to me, it's got very heavy lyrics, but the chorus is really kind of upbeat and catchy, so it kind of helps.
Catches you by surprise.
Right. It kind of turns around during the chorus.
That's awesome. And then these two tracks are off your guys' most recent full length, which came out back in 2017. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Very cool. Where can people pick that record up?
Oh, it's all over. It's on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere you can.
Apple Music.
Apple, yeah.
And we have a very limited number of physical copies of the album for sale.
You can get
available from the website, or you can come check us out at 172. And we
get a whole 2 or 3 left.
We got the rest.
You better jump
get
on
them while you can.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We'll sign them for you.
Single pressings. Once they're done, they're done.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you guys actually have a show tonight at 172 at the Rio, and so let's talk about that a little bit. It's really awesome to see you guys playing there because it's interesting. You don't necessarily see a lot of these kinds of metal shows at a casino venue. So I'm really, really excited to see you guys in this setting, and it's a really awesome venue. I think it's one of those spots where it's almost like the way I usually describe it to people is like it's the kind of rock venue you take someone on a date.
Yeah.
It's got really great sound, it's got a good setup, it's got really, really good selection of drinks, but then also, the food's really awesome, and it's not like, your traditional bar food. It's like sushi and tapas and things like that. So I think it'll definitely be a cool experience, I think, for people who maybe aren't used to that kind of experience at a metal show.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we pushed kind of hard to get in there. Me and Lanto personally worked there, just kind of getting them to open the door up, hopefully, for bands like us, get the scene rolling a little bit more. But like you said, they kind of do more chill stuff there on those days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes I think all it really takes is, sometimes with a lot of this sort of thing, all you got to do is show people once. That's kind of been my experience over the years as a promoter is, sometimes it's just a matter of, showing somebody, look, it went fine, everyone had a great time, you made money, sometimes that's really just kind of, all it takes is just that one time.
Right.
The rock and roll and metal communities here is awesome, getting them out.
Yeah,
that's all we need to do.
Getting people out to come to the shows.
Yeah, and it's not like, back in the 90s where every single metal show there's this huge pit. Everybody just wants to kind of stand around, get drunk, shoot the shit with everybody, and just have a really good time. And that's what we're about, just showing up with the party.
Yeah, I think part of it too is, I think a lot of times it's, people think back to their experiences when they were like a teenager or in their early 20s going to shows, and they assume that 10, 15 years down the road it's going to be the exact same. And the truth is, it's like, most of us are in our late 20s, early 30s now. We just want to relax.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm a dad now. I don't want to.
I'm too old to mosh.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Every time I get suckered into jumping into like a hardcore pit at a show, it's like I can just hear things like creaking and groaning. It's like when you move into like an old house and like the house is quote unquote settling. It's like your bones are settling.
Yeah.
This is a rock and roll retirement home. I think I'm gonna get shipped off there.
35 and up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like that's it. You've had your run.
It's cool that they're letting us play there, and hopefully we can open the door to get heavy metal bands in there, because with all the venues around town closing down, we're running out of spots to play.
Yeah.
And it's a damn shame, because the thing is, it's like I look at the venues that have come and gone in the last few years. I mean, obviously, LVC. I think a lot of people at the time losing LVCS. I think was a huge blow to the metal scene out here, because That was the one spot downtown that was down for metal and heavy shows from day one, from the jump.
Absolutely.
You know, over the years, I mean, I was able to do some heavier stuff at Bunkhouse when I was full-time there. And then, you know, Beauty Bar, I really tried to make the calendar as diverse as possible when I was there. But the thing with Beauty Bar was very much, you know, kind of a hybrid venue. It was kind of, you know, trying to be a lot of things to a lot of people. You know, you had the hip-hop crowd that showed up there, you know, late night after hours. You had the rock crowd that would show up from 8 to 11. So there were a lot of people that kind of, you know, there were a lot of feathers that you had to keep from being ruffled all at once. Whereas with LVCS, you know, LVCS was just really just able to kind of just focus primarily on, you know, on heavy music and really enjoy a lot of success with it. And I'm kind of surprised that, you know, I mean, I think Backstage Bar and Billiards and Fremont Country Club certainly bring a lot of great shows. They actually just announced that Guar package today, which is badass for Fremont Country Club. You know, I definitely think that there definitely has been a void in the last couple of years, and I'm hoping that, you know, more venues will catch on to the fact that A, these shows are not that scary, and B, they can be, you know, from a business perspective, lucrative.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So,
Oh yeah, us metalheads, we love to drink and eat, and so it's you know, so places like Vamped and like 172 that offer drinks and food and a great setting for, you know, live music, especially for hard rock and heavy metal, like those places are got to be thriving because there's so much money that these metalheads bring in to spend on whiskey and beer, you know.
well, I mean, it's very telling. You know, you go to Vamped on any random Friday or Saturday night, and it's almost always packed.
Yeah.
I mean, that says a lot about, you know, you know, they figured out very early on who their audience was, and they were really able to dial it in, and they've done a fantastic job. Yeah, Vamped has succeeded where a lot of venues out here have failed in that regard, and they've done a really awesome job. So I really appreciate what they've seen too.
It's Vamped. It's done right. You know, they have a monitor man, they have a sound guy. It's not like some of these places where it's just like the car stereo is the PA system. You know what I mean?
Well, that's another thing too. Like, I think a big issue a lot of times, you know, that happens, and I don't think necessarily that it's, you know, I've never taken it as necessarily laziness. I've just taken it as like lack of information sometimes. Is, you know, sometimes I'll be approached and be told, hey, you know, so-and-so place wants to do a show, and then I look at it and I'm like, production-wise, there's no way in hell this is going to work. That's something that I think you almost have to know going in if you're opening a place or if you're changing an existing spot to be something like a venue. I feel like you kind of have to know going in, okay, if I want to bring in, you know, X size of band, it's not just a matter of the room being big enough to hold all their fans. It's a matter of having the production quality to ensure that they're going to be able to put on the kind of show their fans deserve.
Yeah.
Right.
Can the fans hear the band and not just the drums? Like, can they hear the guitars? Can they hear the vocals and the bass and everything that the band, you know, brings? You know, to me, that's the most important. So
yeah, it's just got to be done right. You know, Vamp also, you know, everything's on schedule. It's not like, okay, well, we're going on at 10 o'clock and then an hour before actually we're going on at midnight because everything's running behind, everybody's running late. There's always set. It's just done right.
Yeah.
And they're extremely professional there. I mean, anytime I've ever played Vamped in a band, I've booked shows there too in the past, but anytime I've played there as a band, I mean, anything they said was going to happen always happened, and it always happened at the time they said it was going to happen. And, you know, that's something that it's nice to be able to go into a venue and have that peace of mind and not be on eggshells the whole time. Which, I mean, it's frustrating because sometimes even locally bands find themselves in that position where you're not necessarily 100% sure if everything's going to go the way it's supposed to. But I mean, that's.
Oh yeah, we had an experience like that at that place. Where was it? On Sahara, that Halloween thing. Which I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but when I have to end up running the soundboard during our set, you know, I'm out of there. You know, so
that's fun. Well, that's always good.
I've
had a couple of times where I've gone to play a show and then I ended up running the show and I'm like, wait, why am I? What?
Yep.
It's like I feel like the dude in Clerks. I'm not even supposed to be here today. The next track I'm gonna play is it's funny. I actually was joking around with the band Bad Phantom about this because they have a song called Bad Phantom, and I was like, so if your song is named after your band's name, is that technically a title track or is that the theme song?
Yeah, I would say it's the theme song.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the theme song. It sums up everything. You could put that song on, and that sums up, I think, everything that we're about. You know, I mean, it's got the cool fast guitar riffs, the drums, and the vocals, the harmonies, and everything. It's short. you know. So
It's to the point. It's a punch in the face.
right.
Yeah.
And says, here we are. This is who we are.
If you don't like it, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
Here is Tyrants by Night with Tyrants by Night. All right, guys, and that was Tyrants by Night with Tyrants by Night, and we are going to take another quick break. When we get back, I'm going to have a couple more songs from these guys, and I'll be chatting with them a little more. Don't forget to check out their show tonight at 172 Inside the Rio. It is absolutely free and 18 plus, so you have zero excuses for not going, and we will be right back right after this.
Shocking defeat that no one believed. Responses now so clearly seen. Open wounds that we needed to heal. No more
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Pulsar Radio. I'm your host, Patrick Pulsar, and that was new music from Tyrants by Night with their track Led Astray. That was a really awesome track, guys, and definitely a little bit different from the other tracks we've played so far. Do you mind telling me a little bit about this one?
Yeah, sure. That one is like you said, it's a kind of different, but that's also, I don't know if it's necessarily different in the fact to where it's still heavy, but yeah, it's got acoustic guitars and stuff like that. But it's a cool song. It was written, my brother wrote the lyrics to that one as well, and it's I guess you can, I don't want to say what it's about, but you can read into it maybe and figure out what it's about. You read the lyrics, but it's pretty
yeah,
heavy.
it's definitely a very intense song for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I really respect bands that are willing to talk about these things and not dance around stuff. Like that's really important. What do you guys have planned for the future moving forward? Are you guys thinking about getting back into the studio, or are you just focusing on shows right now?
No, we are actually we're playing the show tonight at 172, and then after that we have, I think, July off, and we have about maybe 10 or 11 songs right now that are pretty much complete, and we're gonna start after July we're done. We're gonna take maybe July and finish the ones that are not done, and then we have a show August 2nd at Vamped, and then I think after that we're going to take a break from playing shows and record and release the second Tyrants album.
Take the winter off.
Yeah, very cool. Is it going to be another full length?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I'm still a fan of getting a whole album, not just listening to a single on Spotify. You know what I mean? I get pumped when my favorite bands put out a whole album. So
you guys already got Order of Annihilation,
Right. That was the
single for the album.
The teaser.
That was the appetizer.
Yeah, right. And we might not even put that one on there. We actually have a lot of songs laying around, but it's just a matter of picking up the best ones and polishing them up.
Yeah.
Right on. And I really like the fact that you guys do full lengths. I agree with you on that. I mean, I understand that, I guess even though nowadays, most people get their music through streaming and whatnot, it seems like while the technology is moving in a different way, it seems like in terms of the way music's marketed, it seems like it's really partially reverting back to the way it used to be, where it was more of a focus on singles, which I find kind of ironic because everyone's focusing on singles, but there's literally 30 artists on the radio.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like to me it would make more sense to stand out by having a full length record that really kicks, as opposed to just having a single that maybe is awesome, but you're fighting for airtime with 20 other established major label bands that are already on there.
Yeah.
Right.
I love listening to full albums from my favorite artists, and even new artists. You might hear a single from such and such band, and that catches my attention. Dive into their records, and I always listen start to finish. So that was always a goal of mine with us, is let's do full length. We've got the ability, we have the talent. Let's put our heads together, write some music, and release a kick-ass full-length album that establishes us as where we are now, because now this iteration of Tyrants by Night is a full-fledged band, whereas the first record, as Matt has said, is mostly him and his brother Mike writing everything. And so now Matt doesn't have all the pressure of writing everything. He can do his parts and help and co-create instead of being, primarily the main songwriter. So it's exciting that we're nearing the completion of the writing stage. And
that's awesome. Expanding a little bit more on the writing process with you guys. So is it a lot more collaborative now in terms of how it works?
I think all of us are throwing it in riffs and rhythms here and there.
Yeah, it's usually just like, hey, I was sitting around last night playing video games and the shit came to my head.
Yeah.
And then we'll record it on our phones and send it out via Google Drive, or it'll just be like, oh, practice is tomorrow. I'm going to take this with me. And then it'll be like, okay, well, what does everybody got? And then you just, open up the floor to whatever and then pick it apart. Everybody kind of throws in what they need.
Yeah, sometimes there'll be a song, back to Under Wicked Skies, I had written most of the music for, brought it to Matt when it was still kind of just Matt and I holding the band together for a little bit while we were looking for, a new bass player and a new drummer. And it's a collaborative thing. I say I had 70%, bring it to Matt. We shape it up, get it to the full 100 as far as, okay, this is the structure. Now let's add the bass and the drum fill so Josh can add his flavor and everyone can do their thing and make it a Tyrant song, not just this is your part, play it, and that's how it's good. That's not fun. So.
And if things don't work, we'll let them stew and we'll change them.
Yeah, things aren't 100% until we feel they are fully 100%. So everyone is love that, don't like that, change that, flip this or whatever. It's everyone has a voice, and it's it's nice.
That's awesome. That's really, really refreshing to hear, for sure. Yeah, and what you said about the song's done when it's done. I really, really appreciate that, because I think, and I've been on both ends of it, especially when you're in the studio. Sometimes there's just that pressure to just get it done. Sometimes you'll find yourself kind of rushing through things because you're like, okay, it's good enough, and then weeks or even months later you'll go back and listen to it and be like, shit, I could have done this or that or whatever with it.
Absolutely. Yep. I think we don't want to load and reload this where we just kind of knock songs into shape. We want to go full on Master of Puppets with this and put our best foot forward and knock people out of their seats on the first listen.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, totally. It's funny with Load and Reload, like my reaction as a kid when I heard those records was I liked both of them, but I was kind of like, this would have been one really, really awesome record.
Yeah. I enjoy them, but I agree that if they could have trimmed some of the fat and put all the best tracks together, it would have been one solid, really great record. Instead, you have two good records, and nothing against them, but it's, like I was saying, they even said it themselves in their some kind of monster movie that they kind of knocked shit together where it sounded good enough, as opposed to let's really dig into it and put our best foot forward.
Yeah, and I can imagine to some extent that was probably a bit of a reaction to the process for writing for a record like the Black Album, where everything was just beaten to a fine edge for so long.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine after that they probably were ready to just jam. So
absolutely.
So I mean, like I almost that was why, like when Load and Reload and then Saint Anger came out, I think I reacted to them a little bit differently than I think a lot of fans did, in the sense that, like, while the records certainly had their issues, there were also parts of them that I liked, but I also was like, okay, I can kind of understand why they would make a record like this. Absolutely. And then it was like, then when like Death Magnetic came out, I was like, okay, now we're talking.
Yeah, they're back to form.
I don't know. I would say Load would be my favorite Metallica album because it's not heavy metal, but I'm over the fact that everything has to be metal and everything has to be 2,000 miles an hour all the time. There's some really good songwriting on that album. And Hetfield has some really good lyrics and stuff on that Load album. So that's
definitely. I mean, God, like there's some tracks on there, like Mama Said and some other ones that just really stand out.
That's probably one of my favorite songs. One of my favorite songs is Country As It Is. I Don't Care.
Bleeding
I like
Me,
it.
Outlaw Torn.
Yep.
Ain't My Bitch. King Nothing. Yeah, that. I mean, and what I was saying earlier, I'm not bashing those albums. I think they're great, and I understand why they made them. But like when people think Metallica, they don't think Load and Reload. Yeah,
and it's a different songwriting process. And I think a lot of people assume that bands always write songs the same way, and so when the results are dramatically different from record to record, they're kind of taken aback. It's like they go into it with the mind. I think sometimes listeners go into it, especially listeners who don't actually play music. I think sometimes they'll go from record to record with a band, and they'll be like, it's like they'll take it personally when something's changed about the band. But they don't really understand, why the change happened or where the changes came from. I mean, I remember when 18 Vision signed with Epic Records, and they came out with a record that sounded like Stone Temple Pilots with Pantera breakdowns. And so many of my friends were like, what the hell? They're selling out. And I'm like, this is what they wanted to do all along.
Yeah.
I was like, you can kind of tell, like, listening to it, I was like, no, this is kind of what they wanted to play.
Yeah, I think that's it happens with maturity, too. I think I don't listen to the same kind of music that I did when I was, 20 years old. Now that I'm, 30 something, so so my influences are different. So the stuff I'm listening to now is having an influence on the stuff that I write. So, there's no more, heavy metal really anymore in my life. So I can see that's where kind of things change for them too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there's even like bands that I'm finding myself coming back to now, where maybe 10 years ago I would have, maybe not necessarily been super into them, but now I'm like going back. I mean, it's kind of funny. So one of the events that I put on pretty regularly is I have an emo night that I put on in West Hollywood that I do every couple months, and at the Viper Room. And it's funny because going out to it and hearing some of those songs, and seeing like kids sing along to them and freak out about them. Some of these are songs that, maybe 10 years ago, I either would have like kind of been whatever about, or even like found annoying or not even liked. And I'm like in my head singing along to all of them just because it's like, it just brings me back to that point.
Right.
And, and it was funny because there's sometimes you don't appreciate a track or a band until like years after the fact, or even if it's not a matter of like saying, okay, well, that's a good song now, and I just didn't think about it the first time. Maybe it's just like, okay, well, maybe the song is whatever, but maybe the riff was really good, or maybe the beat was awesome. Maybe there was some sort of element from there that I could take and, as I'm writing later on, maybe incorporate some of those ideas or themes into my own stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I did that with My Chemical Romance. I got into them after they had already broken up, and their album, The Black Parade, is just insane. It's like people lumped them in with that emo, mid 2000s scene, but like those guys were on a different level as far as songwriting. They're much more in the world of Queen than The Used. It was very much bigger, more mature songwriting in a scene that they had the look, but they didn't quite have the sound. It was just, I remember them being around when I was in high school, and I was like, oh, I was a metal dude. I'm like, no, that's lame. That's, whatever. And then I get older, taste change. I can appreciate things. I hear that record, and it's like, holy shit, I was missing out. Like, this band is on a different level. So, I unfortunately got into them after they'd already, broke up. So.
Yeah, and I like what you said about that's a super good comparison too. I mean, I think I never really considered them an emo band. I considered them like an arena rock band. Like they to me were like this. I mean, I remember like when I saw them live a few years back, they played the Black Parade front to back, and it was an arena production, and I mean, it really felt like a show, and that was really, really cool.
Yeah, and that was one of those things where it's like I had always lumped them in with the emo scene, and then I see it and hear it, I'm like, these guys are arena rock. They're not, sitting there crying about their girlfriends. Like, no, they're talking about doing drugs and dying and all the cool shit, all the fun stuff.
I think a lot of times, metal bands definitely suffer from that sort of typecasting as well. I mean, I've had times where I felt like I've had to, really push the idea to people that, metalheads are not these like knuckle dragging Neanderthals that we keep getting like, made out to be. That there's a lot of really intelligent metal and heavy music out there. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily just mean like in terms of like, super tech stuff or math metal or anything like that. I mean lyrically, from a live show perspective.
Yeah. Well, and I think Matt and I are probably the closest in musical taste. Bands like Iced Earth, where the primary songwriter John Schaefer, very intelligent, very well written lyrics, thought provoking stuff. From literature and history and things throughout the world that and he was inspired by Iron Maiden, who used to do that. So it's like there is intelligent music out there. There's intelligent metal that we're not a bunch of beer swilling Neanderthals like you're saying. Like we like history, we like books, we like movies. Like we're not just all about brutality. Like there's thought provoking lyrics or things that inspire you to pick up a book. Like I got into so many books and reading up on the Civil War because of Iced Earth. Like a band to do that, I think is to impact you beyond your listening experience. I think is a really cool thing that a band can do. So if you hear a song from us that say is about a book, a battle, whatever, and that inspires the listener to then read about it and learn about it, then boom, that's fucking amazing. I love that.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I want to talk a little bit about this last track I'm about to play, In the Name of God, if you don't mind explaining this one for me.
This is, I don't know, it's just a pissed off song. It's fast as hell. It has my favorite riffs of basically any Tyrant song, and it's, I don't know, it's just a crushing song.
It's a pummeler. It's energy.
It grabs you right off the bat. The first riff is just, it punches you in the face, and it doesn't stop until the very last cymbal crash.
Is this the only one with no guitar solo?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
probably.
So it's got that 90s feel, just we don't need guitar solos. We're just gonna come in, punch you in the face, and get the fuck out.
Yeah, it's just there just wasn't room for it in the song. I'm not gonna put a guitar solo in a song just to say, ooh, look, I can play the guitar solo. I play to serve the song. No.
I think it's another well written song lyrically and musically that kind of expresses the unrest, the unease and tension that's going on, especially not just in America, in the world. Like it's everywhere. So it's just one of those. It's just bringing these subjects to light that a lot of people aren't really talking about. So I thought it was cool that
in a very tasteful way. Too.
Yeah. and not picking sides. It's just, this is how it is. So I thought it was cool that Matt and Mike could that wrote something like that, and it's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, being able to talk about these kind of subjects, but being able to at the same time, kind of let the listener decide how they feel about it that's a very, very difficult tightrope to walk. But I think you guys are very good at doing that.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Because especially like in a community like the metal scene, you tend to get when it comes to beliefs and value systems, you tend to get a pretty wide swath of people. It's not as you get people on the far left, you get people on the far right, but where you get people in the center just trying to do their thing. But then you also get the thing we all seem to have in common is that we all have this particular style of music that just really speaks to us.
Right.
And and it's like one of the things I remember telling one of my friends is I'm like when it comes to, politics, I have my opinions and stuff, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily dictate who my friends are. That doesn't dictate, my circle. That's not my prerequisite. I mean, there are certain areas where I will draw the line in terms of certain beliefs, but I mean, if we disagree on taxes or on fiscal policy, that's not going to be a deal breaker on my being someone's friend, and it's not going to keep me from talking to them.
Yeah, that's getting out of hand right now. How your political beliefs have now defined you as a person, and people will judge you as a person. Just be, it's out of control. This country's out of control. But that's all I'm going to say.
Michael Lance, a Republican. Oh, so you're a racist. Oh,
yeah, right. Well, we won't get into that.
It's like, I'm a Democrat. You're a dirty commie. Yeah, it's like, I think it's pretty funny with like people. I've had a couple times where people are like, you're a socialist, and I'm like, I'm a concert promoter. I wouldn't be a very good concert promoter if I didn't believe in capitalism.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I wouldn't be very good at my job.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. It's been super rad talking to you, and it's awesome being able to just, it's awesome being able to just talk about this sort of stuff and not have it, it's nice being able to talk about these sort of things and not feel like I'm, trying to, walk not only through coals, but then through eggshells at the same time.
Yeah. You should be able to talk to everybody. That's everyone's problem. Everyone gets too offended easily and then has a completely closed mind now. It's just ridiculous. Talk, listen, love. You know what I mean?
That's it. That's all that matters.
And half the time, I feel like when I talk to people about stuff, I would rather just let them talk most of the time, at least especially when it's someone new, just so I can kind of, get an idea of what their worldview is, as opposed to immediately just trying to crack them over the head with mine.
Yeah, here's how I feel, and you need to know this right now. It's that your way of thinking is the way I wish everyone would think. Like, listen, see where they're coming from, and then adapt, and then that's fuck. It's so frustrating that it's something so simple like that.
We're gonna go write a
that
song
is
about
so
this.
difficult for people to do. That's the frustrating part for me. It's just
I think it gets to everybody. I think it gets to everybody, and I think the thing that they, and whether you want to say they is the media or the top 1% or the Illuminati or whatever, I mean, I think the thing that they rely on is the fact that people aren't willing to, just say, hey, beyond a couple of key issues, we probably aren't that far apart on what we really want.
Yeah.
Right.
Or what we need. Because, I mean, everybody wants the same thing. We want to be able to take care of our families. We want to be able to, have a decent job. We want to be able to spend, our free time doing the things we love. And most of us just don't want to be told what to do in the rest of the time. As long as we're, it's like, as long as you're paying your taxes and not breaking the law, it's like, I feel like I've fulfilled my part of the social contract.
Yeah, absolutely. What a concept.
Yeah, what a concept.
Yeah. So I'm going to go jump into this track right now. This is Tyrants by Night with In the Name of God.
borders on a country that has never threatened our security, and the legal justification comes from not the U.S. Congress, as the Constitution demands, but from a clearly unconstitutional authority, the United Nations.
Awake the nation to see the truth, no longer believe in the lies. It's causing terror and the spread of fear to keep us all in line. Police infection up to your protection is what we're led to believe. Cause a distraction for what really matters, mindless slaves is what we'll be. Trust in your faith, don't believe what you see. Reality is not what it seems. Believe what you're told, we're all made soul. Finding the truth will set you free. Trust in your faith, don't believe what you see. Reality is not what it seems. We've all been betrayed, they made us all slaves. Time to reclaim humanity.
The War Powers Resolution of 1973 has done nothing to keep our presidents from policing the world, spending billions of dollars, killing many innocent people, and jeopardizing the very troops that should be defending America.
All right, guys, that was Tyrants by Night with In the Name of God here on Pulsar Radio on RadioVegas.rocks. I want to thank my in-studio guests, Tyrants by Night, for joining me. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us, dude.
Thanks for having us, man.
Great.
Absolutely. And once again, you can catch these guys tonight at 172 Inside the Rio. It is a absolutely free show. It's 18 plus, and there's free parking. You have zero excuses for not going. Be there or be forever lame.
Yeah.
Exactly. And make sure you check out Tyrants by Night online. Really quick, guys, before we go to the break, can you guys go ahead and plug like your socials and your links and stuff so I can make sure people can track you down?
Facebook, Instagram, Tyrants by Night.
TyrantsByNight.com.
Yeah, we got shirts that we're going through clearance with the rest of the albums and the shirts, so they're on sale right now online for the next batch. And like we said, once they're done, they're done. So TyrantsByNight.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tinder, Grindr, all of it.
Yeah.
We want to connect with everyone.
Now you can give out your personal grinder account.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And we will be right back on Pulsar Radio on RadioVegas.rocks right after this.